Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Energy MD podcast, where we're on a mission to help people who have chronic fatigue, long COVID, and mast cell activation syndrome so they can live the life that they deserve. And as you know, we talk about a lot of the different causes and a lot of the different levels of healing. And I'm super excited because today we're going to be talking about bioenergetics with my friend, Dr. Greg Eckel. So let's learn a little bit about Dr. Greg. So his journey into naturopathic and Chinese medicine began in the mid-1990s when he noticed the overmedication of children while teaching preschool. In 2001, he co-founded Nature Cures Clinic in Portland, Oregon, and later founded bVital. Did I say that right?
Right.
bVital, a wellness and recharging center in Park City, Utah. His unique combination of naturopathic and Chinese medicine provides an array of tools to treat acute and chronic illness, emphasizing prevention and wellness principles. Dr. Eckel's personal experience with his wife's Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease led him on a deep dive into regenerative medicine. Through this, he developed a brain regenerative program and a nasal spray that specifically targets neuroinflammation in the brain. He utilizes intranasal stem cell delivery, mind-body techniques, and other procedures to correct the body's control systems and protect the body's energy. He believes the future of medicine lies in frequency, and he's leading the way in bringing bioenergetics mainstream. I love that. Dr. Eckel has been featured on major networks like ABC, NBC, and Fox, and has reached over 150,000 people with his online brain regeneration and bioenergetic summits. He's also published a book called Shake It Off, an integrative approach to Parkinson's solutions, and served as the president of the board of naturopathic medical examiners. Dr. Greg, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Dr. Evan.
So we're going to be talking about bioenergetics. So I guess give us a little bit of an introduction to bioenergetics as a nice place to start.
Love it. Yeah. So this is a term that's kind of new in the lexicon, but it's really old. And I'll start with a quote with Nikola Tesla, right? We got the Tesla quote coming out. But if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Now, that we know he lived a while back. And so we're bringing quantum physics and understanding of quantum reality into play clinically. And when you look at the two systems of physics, like we can get out there really quickly, but I don't want folks, don't glaze over yet. When you think of Newtonian physics of like point A to point B with time in between, that's what we all grew up with. That's the older physics. Now, that can be proved up to about 84 to 85% certainty. Then you get quantum physics, which kind of stands this concept of time, gets rid of time. And it says, actually, in a quantum reality, which is what we have as well, it can be proved up to 89, 88, 89%. So there's a little bit more certainty when you start talking in terms of quantum physics versus Newtonian physics. But what we all grew up with was this older physics, Newtonian physics. So what we're looking to do is really accelerate our understanding, number one, of bioenergetics, and number two, really bring a reality with like case studies like we'll talk about today of like, well, what does that look like in the real world? Like we are mattered particled beings, and what I'm going to start talking about is waveform and frequency. How we can best understand that is these little supercomputers that we have in our hands, right? These are, or if you're old enough to remember radio stations, right? Where you tune the dial and where you had the static. And once you hit the line on the car radio, the sound came through, right? So we can understand there are frequencies traveling in and around our bodies into devices like a receiver. So if that makes sense to you, we have these supercomputers, right? I'm guessing that it does. You're watching this on the internet. These things, what are called our bodies, are also receivers that are receiving frequencies and interpreting those signals. So that is basically bioenergetics is the study of living energy.
Mm. I love the way you worked in accelerate. You want to accelerate this into mainstream. I think that was like an electron joke, right?
Yes.
I had to get that one in there. Yeah.
You got it. That was good. And so, yeah.
So I was going to say, so in terms of these bioenergetics, so it sounds like it's this field. It sounds like it's like these frequencies that are coming in. So it's these things that we can't really see that our bodies are coming into contact with. Is that accurate to say?
That is accurate to say. And we would say the frequencies or fields actually create all matter. They create our form. They create our organs. They create the desk. They create the glass. It's the field and frequency that actually, which is a wave, creates a particle, which is matter. So, I don't want to geek out too much on that because it's a really fascinating concept, but in what really moves the needle for folks listening for health purposes is we're looking to move way upstream. When you start talking about root cause illness or dis-ease, instead of moving from mattered to mattered with time in between, if we're able to actually stack that up and get rid of time, we can actually create radical changes in health really quickly.
Amazing. And so we have a hard time measuring this, at least from a conventional standpoint. I think that sometimes in order for something to become more accepted, it has to be measured. And we're going to talk about how you have a way of measuring, which is super cool. And this takes me back to actually Star Wars and thinking about the Force, where in like 4, 5, 6, there's no real way to kind of quantify it. But then all of a sudden I saw episode 1, I think it was, and they like plug something in and they're like, oh gosh, this guy, and they're talking about like Anakin Skywalker. They're like his whatevers are off the chart. I can't even remember what the term is. And so it's you have a way of quantifying it, but would you agree that this is part of the reason why it hasn't caught on because we don't have a way of quantifying it that's mainstream?
It is. And, I actually really, in the bioenergetics centers, and this being the first flagship of that here in Park City, we're really interested in performing that research. And in a scientific process, you have to have quantification. And it's very tough to quantify subtle energies. So, I actually have come across some really interesting, devices. There's we're living at an amazing time. Now, I don't have this implemented yet, but where I'm going with it is there's a vibroacoustic measurement device of a gentleman out of the, Bay Area, Google Town, we'll call it. And he has a device that measures sub-perceptible sound. And in that static can create and pick up signatures of viruses of, I think you've seen this maybe on television. They have it in vibroacoustic rooms where they're now measuring people's gaits and they can determine if somebody's getting sick or not by the way the pitter patter of our feet go in the morning. This is a way we can keep people in their homes longer, kind of at like stay at home rather than having to move into a home. Or he's going to use it for, utilizing sounds of the heart that are way more accurate than an auscultation of, with the stethoscope. So thermography, dark field microscopy, but there's not a standard on some of these measurement devices. So we're kind of in a conundrum as far as, okay, well, clinically, how do we measure that? Now, we have some ways of measuring it in the lab that I want to share some of that research with you and your listeners and viewers coming out of University of California, San Diego, that we can make sure something's happening. This isn't just woo-woo energy medicine where it's like, I'm a thick-bodied, like I played collegiate hockey. Like I like to feel things, right? And so that's, I want to get changes in the real world for real people. That's what gets me up in the morning and excited. And so, while we can emit fields with pulsed electromagnetic frequency, I mean, I've got, a book called Tools of Health by, I think it's Dr. Polvik. Don't quote me on that last name, but it's a compendium of all the research on pulsed electromagnetic frequencies. So I love research, and that's the scientific method is really important. And so really utilizing research and pulling together what actually gets results for folks. And really, the bottom line is creating transformation faster for as many people as we can. Mm-hmm. And we do that through a detect, correct, and protect methodology that I want to share in maybe a framework that we're talking around post-viral syndromes, long COVID, things like that, so we can make it more real.
Excellent. So should we go into that first, or do you want to talk about like how to assess people from a bioenergetic perspective?
Let's talk about assessing. So what gets complicated and confusing is that when you move into a quantum reality and a discussion is you have limitless possibilities, which is very frustrating to an engineering mind. I've found this very difficult for folks that have a predilection towards one side of the brain versus the other. In that, how can at this moment in time, like now, there's endless possibilities until you actually observe it, and that gets the field into a particle, and then boom, you measure. So like with blood work, you pull your blood and you get a serial measurement of the blood. Well, we're in a Newtonian physics discussion there. And so there's a correlation through time on that. Now we could do, what we do is a holographic voice scan. So by utilizing your voice, this is not measuring on the vagus nerve, even though the vagus nerve does innervate the vocal cords. What we're utilizing with the voice is a holographic representation of the field of different organs, the field around your body. It doesn't necessarily mean you have this issue now, but it means it's in the frequencies surrounding your entity energetically. So, okay, well, what does that mean? How do we do it? We can do it. So I really implemented this during COVID, actually, where we were all locked in doing Zoom all day, and some of us still do Zoom all day like this. But it's a way for me to get into that little green dot right there, into your living room, kind of like we are right now, not in a creepy way, but in a very healthy, healing way, and get a really amazing report. It's basically 12 pages of information based off of you counting to 10, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I was amazed. I will tell you, I was a bit skeptical of this until I put it into practice. And the level of discussion I got into people around their emotions, around even so, like there was one read that came up with, this person has an issue with calcium metabolism and possibly in the kidneys, potentially meaning they have kidney stones. I brought this up to a woman and she looked at me like, what is going on, Dr. Greg? She's like, I just got diagnosed with kidney stones last week. And it's calcium oxalates, so it was able to do that from her voice. So this aspect of hologram that I want to talk about, there's this ancient saying in Chinese medicine, what happens in the microcosm happens in the macrocosm, and vice versa. The macrocosm, the universe, is in you, and you are in the universe. And this is an old kind of Taoist, old Chinese medicine philosophy thing. And I've been saying it for 25 years after I read the Yellow Emperor's Internal Medicine Classic, and got to wake up in a meditation state of, oh, that's actually a very true statement. In a quantum reality, we truly are the universe. Like this expression of reality and a totality of oneness, it's just one thing. It's just the 10,000 things is what they say in Chinese medicine, right? There was the one, then the two, then the three, then the 10,000 things. You can do that with Christianity. First there was the word, right? And then the word beget reality. So there is, across the board in these ancient traditions, they've been talking about this for a long time. So we're just really bringing it into a clinical encounter. So we measure it with that. We also have a My Health device that we can put on the body and measures bioimpedance in the connective tissue. So you're looking at the body electric. You're looking at the energy running in the system. and looking at the body as a battery, as a charge, as an electrical current. And we know, we can bring in different fields of science around that. Like there's an exclusionary zone around every cell. Well, what does that mean? That means there's stratified water that creates a buffer and a barrier that allows certain things into the cell, into the mitochondria, which is the energy factory of every cell of the body. All of those add up to create an electrical being. We can even see light being emitted now from our DNA. So these aspects, like, when I started medical school in 1996, I was not talking like this, Evan. I was not. I was really in, biochemistry, physiology, anatomy, functional medicine arrays, stool analysis, urine analysis, blood. But bringing this facet in, it doesn't mean we eliminate all of that, but just to get another look energetically, bioenergetically, can give some amazing insights into the body's energy systems, what's going on emotionally, possibly around past traumas. I find it super insightful.
Excellent. So it sounds like there's a couple of these devices. There's one for the voice, and then there's one you put your hand on and one you put over your body, right? And they're measuring the field and they're providing data, and then you can take that data and you can use it clinically.
Yes.
Cool.
So it's based off of the work of Peter Fraser and Harry Massey. These two, Peter passed a couple years ago. Harry actually is a dear friend here in Utah, and so we get into these fascinating discussions around this new medicine, even though it's kind of been old, like the Tesla quote that I shared at the beginning of the show. These thoughts have been in science and quantum physics for a long time. I think we're looking for ways to interpret it into English so that we can all understand it. And then I think really make practical applications. So for instance, okay, Dr. Greg, that sounds really cool. It sounds Star Trekky or Star Wars, and you have this tricorder device and you could measure, different frequencies on the body. Well, we actually have some research to back it up, thankfully. And that's coming out of UCSD. There was, so you can take the frequencies and program it into a carrier solution, such as like a mineral complex, and they're called infoceuticals. And those we've shown with different remedies, we've seen the half-life of viral replication, in particular COVID of all things. It showed over a 24-hour period, it cut the half-life of replication of that virus in a petri dish. We've shown greater than 50% mitochondrial uptick of increased energy from the mitochondria with certain remedies into solution feeding mitochondria. So we've got some pretty cool things coming down the pike as we get more and more of that evidence, bringing it into clinic. So a real world example of that is I'd worked with a woman for a decade, and she credits us for keeping her walking. We did stem cell injections in her hip. She's still walking. She was looking at a hip replacement. She no longer needed that. We had got her sleep under control, her energy up, but she had hypertension, high blood pressure. She was on 3 or 4 different medications, still uncontrolled hypertension, and have been working with her for a decade. I did a voice scan, gave her there's 5 remedies that come up on the voice scan. With first couple days, her pulse went from 80 beats per minute down to 60 beats per minute. And her blood pressure went from 150 over 90 to 120 over 80. The only intervention we did were these remedies. And that was thankfully early on when I started utilizing the medicines and, or remedies, we can call them. And to see actual, like, that's a tough case. Like, essential hypertension is very difficult for all medicine. And to have these remedies come in and create such substantial change for her. I got to interview, some people would say, well, maybe that's placebo. Well, I got to interview a veterinarian out of Europe, and horses have this thing that'll put them out of commission. And he gets to see like very expensive horses that are in the racing world, and they get this condition called hoof rot, when their hoofs get rot, and there's not a great blood flow in a horse hoof. And he treated this horse with the MyHealth device, that kind of tricorder that I was talking about. And it's been like, basically you have to put the horse down if they get that, because it's just the antibiotics don't get in there. They can't get them back. One horse, first time, it cured the horse of that condition. And, you know, him being a scientist and vet, he said, you know what, if this works on the next, you know, if I can get 5 cases of this and it works, I'm in. And he said it has been like one of the most effective remedies that he has discovered. And I mean, these are like horses, they have millions of dollars invested in these horses. So for him to be able to do that, and that's not the horse thinking like, oh, this thing's going to work for me. The horse is standing there, right?
That's a very good question. Does the placebo work on horses? But no, that is very convincing. So we've talked about assessment, we've talked about treatment, which would come in these forms of these infoceuticals that are like little vials that you put in your mouth, right? Or you put drops in your mouth or something?
They're drops. They come in different varieties. So there is the MyHealth device. That is it's kind of like a tricorder from Star Trek, if you've ever watched that. I'm a Trekkie fan. Jean-Luc Picard was my favorite captain, just for the record. So utilizing the MyHealth device, like we travel with it. I don't leave home without it, because it has a whole compendium of a lot of the remedies on there. So you could just dial it up for, you know, we do a basically radiation protection thing on the planes, and it has things for cold and viruses and musculoskeletal. It's amazing. I had frozen shoulder developing after an injection that went ARI, that I couldn't lift my arm up beyond this without like a 9 out of 10 pain. 2 days later, I had full range of motion of the shoulder just with a topical application of the MyHealth. So you can do it off body, on body. You can take the remedies, they're programmed with information in them. In addition to, you know, we're taking care of the physical form and the functional aspects of, if the receiver is not the body, if it's not whole, you don't have the energy running properly, you have to remove obstacles to cure, which would be imbalances of electrical currents, the charge on the body, and any pathogenic issues or injuries along those lines.
And which do you think works better, the MyHealth device or the infoceuticals?
You know, that's a great question. So it's tough to utilize the MyHealth every day. I like, honestly, the combination of them gets much better results. I do like the infoceuticals because you can dose yourself multiple times a day and with frequency through time. So they both work. I think the easiest one are the remedies, because they're in a liquid carrier and bottles. The MyHealth, there's an investment on that device, so it's not, you know, not for everybody, but it is a very effective tool.
Okay, great. And then you have this phrase, detect, correct, and protect. How does that fit into all this?
Yeah, so the detect we talked about on the assessment. So we're utilizing and checking the body's energy and information. So that's the NES voice scan. We do advanced labs and imaging, you know, when appropriate. We do the whole functional array. We do blood work, you know, the stool and the urine, and blood testing. So that's all in the detect component. The correct is correcting the body's energy flow, the emotions and imbalances at a deep core level, in addition to the frequencies that are surrounding. So that would be the infoceuticals, the MyHealth, up to regenerative stem cell therapies. We do that. Utilizing, we actually do psychedelic assisted therapies now in the centers for healing deep traumas, PTSD, depression, anxiety. I see those emotional patterns for folks to get really in the way of charging the body battery. So we've got to address those things as they come up. IV therapy, hyperbarics, sound healing. We do sound bowls and gongs and those frequencies carrying intentions into people. We do hormone, you know, bioidentical hormone therapies, peptides, course, nutraceuticals, Chinese herbs is one of my specialties. So we're utilizing very eclectic practice there. And then the protect, right? We want to get somebody to the top of the mountain feeling good. And then we're protecting the body's energy. So that is around recharging the body battery. Hyperbarics are very important to keep the oxygen charge up in the body. That helps. It's anti-inflammatory, helps the body heal quicker. Light beds, lasers, pulsed electromagnetic frequency pads, low-level laser light pads. So we put light into the body, feeding the mitochondria, increasing body charge. When I find when the voltage of the body is up, it's great enough disease or illness doesn't happen because you've got enough of a terrain, a strong foundation, that those things just kind of get ejected off of the body.
Brilliant. So you have this wealth of knowledge on all of these different treatment modalities. So let's pivot a little bit to some of the stuff that's near and dear to my heart: chronic fatigue and long COVID. So
Yes.
what are you seeing in terms of utilizing all these different treatment modalities that's like the biggest bang for the buck and helping people? Let's focus on long COVID.
Yeah.
What have you seen as the biggest bang for the buck for these people?
Yeah, so I mean, this is an epidemic, as we know. So many folks don't even realize that they have symptoms from that virus, because it has been such a slow boil and simmer for so long that the system doesn't really recognize it until you're in it, with the brain fog, the fatigue, maybe the myalgias, the muscle pains, the aches, just the general malaise, the emotional toll on it. And so really it all starts, everybody has a different path. And long COVID is kind of unique to COVID, but it's also very similar to post-viral syndrome. So that constellation of symptoms now has the official dreaded name of the long COVID. But, we've been seeing this with Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, herpes simplex virus. Those are the great mimickers, and Lyme disease also can fit into that category. So oftentimes, the folks that have got that general constellation is their body battery was not charged enough. And so these things are remaining. Well, what are the biggest culprits? So we're getting worked up on, one, making sure your thyroid is optimal, making sure you don't have anemia, checking the gut health and making sure you don't have inflammation there. Because if you've got inflammation in the gut, it starts to gap the cells, larger food particles get into your blood. Your blood and immune system is already very active because it's got this post-viral syndrome where things are ramped up. It starts to attack these foods that haven't been seen because they shouldn't be in the blood. That creates more inflammation, goes to your blood-brain barrier, starts to open that up, and then you've got inflammation on your brain. So that pattern, you got to check the gut. You look at sympathetic versus parasympathetic tone. So measuring heart rate variability and or blood pressure sitting and standing is a kind of a simple at-home test. If you're falling greater than 10 millimeters of mercury on a blood pressure when you stand up, you have some postural orthostatic hypotension symptoms, means your adrenal glands aren't working, and there's a stress component. Components, the smoking guns that I see though are chronic Lyme infections, heavy metals, and the latent viruses. So those need to be ruled out. So it's not I don't go right to therapeutics, because the path, if you just start going in a certain direction, you might be heading the exact wrong direction and you've just wasted your time. You're going to get into therapeutic burnout. I see a lot of people that have tried XYZ because I read it on the internet. And, it's like a year and a half, they've been struggling with these symptoms and they just never got a thorough assessment or workup. And I know that's what you thrive on in your programs, of like, it is that not everybody is bio-individually treated and assessed and worked up. Yes, the framework is very similar, but what we do for you is specifically for you. So I'll say the assessment really is crucial.
Brilliant. And so then let's say you find somebody who's got some of these latent viruses. Do you have a favorite antiviral, or let's say they've got COVID and Epstein-Barr virus.
Mhm.
Do you have a favorite antiviral or a favorite treatment?
You
Is it
know,
IV? Is it hyperbarics? Is it
so
supplement?
so there's a couple things there. So one of the biggest levers that we have put in is called the EBU, the external or extra. Actually, I've got an external,
Extracorporeal.
corporeal blood ozonation and oxygenation, EBU. It just rolls off the tongue, right? It's like you're getting 30 ozone treatments in about 50 minutes. So it's filtering the blood, 2 liters of your 5 liters of blood, exposing it to ozone, oxygen, and then 4 varieties of UV light. And then we actually put frequencies back into that cleaned up blood with an imprinter, that bioenergetic component, and then it comes back into the body. I had a woman, it was not long COVID, it was chronic fatigue syndrome. She was 33, had a couple young kids at home. It was like heartbreaking, right? She came in, I said, well, what brought you in? She said, well, my 3-year-old said to me, Mommy, you're always so tired. You're always saying, just give me a minute, kids. I got to lay down. And it, like, that just broke my heart hearing it. We did 3 EBUs once a week for 3 weeks. Her husband came up afterwards and said, can you turn her off? And I was like, watch what you're asking for. Like, she's been down on the couch, right, since the kids were born. And so it was that effective. Like, she had tremendous energy, like totally cleaned up the blood and the infections and the chronic viral component. So that one is awesome. I do like the voice scans for folks remotely, and we do a lot of coaching and remote support for folks just because this medicine isn't everywhere. And I wanted to be able to reach people where they're at. They're, depending on what comes up on that scan, occasionally we will add, there's a remedy called ET2, energetic terrain 2. That's the one that they did the research at UCSD for halving the replication of the COVID virus. So it's very effective at, I think, at viral immunity and ramping up the lymphocytes, et cetera. Well, I shouldn't say ramping up, I should watch my language, modulating the immune system to be aware that there's something that shouldn't be in there. Yeah.
Excellent. So, and have you noticed with the EBU, one of the things that I used to do in my clinic was doing some IV ozone.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an oxygenative therapy, and I've seen this also with hyperbaric oxygen. And so I have with the oxygenative or pro-oxygenative therapies, oftentimes you can get die-off, where you're killing off an infection is more than the body can tolerate.
Mm-hmm.
What are you finding with the EBU? Are you seeing die-off, or is it built in where it kind of helps to mitigate it?
Yeah, so those Herxheimer reactions are very few and far between, even depending on, doesn't matter on viral load. It is a rather gentle process, but my crystal ball is good. It's not that good. So I do warn folks about that occurrence, that is short-lived. We actually used to get that with that we were doing some research on some frequencies that we would run through the body with like Rife machines. And I use those for research purposes only, but they can be very effective for chronic Lyme, chronic fatigue, long COVID. And so there's a lot of things that we can do. I rarely ever, I don't think I've seen that once in a hyperbaric chamber, but we do can occasionally get that with the EBU.
And how many sessions does it usually take folks to notice a difference?
2 to 3. So, and what I like about it, so it's a little different than doing a bolus of ozone. So if you're doing ozone IVs or 10 passes, that's a big amount of ozone all at once. The EBU is a slow and gentle filtering. So it is, it comes out one arm through the apparatus and then back in the other arm. And so it's a slow filter. So you're slowly exposing the blood and any viruses to the ozone rather than a big bolus coming in that sometimes is a little bit of a shock to the system.
Does it address clotting at all? I mean, it sounds a little bit like some of the some of the techniques that are being done in Europe to address some of the microclotting associated with long COVID?
I haven't seen that per se. I mean, we will use serrapeptidase or lumbrokinase, other enzymatic therapies to help kind of get rid of the spike proteins and eliminate the clotting factor, or that rouleau effect that's happening with the quote unquote sticky blood. Oxygenating the blood, though, it's potently anti-inflammatory. It also drives the NRF2 pathway, which is really pro-healing as well. So there's a lot of other benefits. It's not, I say that there's a filter, but the filter is not filtering items out. It's really there to expose the blood to more oxygen for that effectiveness of the ozone therapy.
Very cool. And the UV that's part of that is also antimicrobial.
Potently.
Oh.
And there's 4 different wavelengths going in. So the tube goes right through the 4 bulbs. So it's different frequencies going in, I think, modulating and really being antiviral there. It's also very effective for mold, Lyme, chronic fatigue along these lines. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, sounds like a great tool. So great. So we are at the end of our time together. So you've got a free gift for the folks who are listening. You want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. So it is the voice scan. I really am about accelerating the change. And so I think that the best way to do it is to actually see for yourself. Be curious. Come with questions, and we will give you a free voice scan, and we will go over it with you, because, it really is, I got into medicine to be of service. And this is one of those aha moments for me of, sometimes it's hard to believe it until you see it. So that's the component. Now, sometimes it resonates, sometimes it doesn't, but overall you get into a really amazing conversation. And we only want folks that are serious. So not just to be like totally like, oh, I just want to do the voice scan, see you later. I mean, we'll send you the report after you talk to somebody, but I would, we're really out here to help. So let's see if we can get some insights for you, and we're going to offer that up for your viewers and listeners.
Awesome. Thank you. So we will put that under this episode. And then best place to find you is energy4lifecenters.com. Is that right?
Yep. With the number 4. Yep. Energy4 Life Centers with an S.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today, Greg. I really appreciate you bringing more knowledge to this world of bioenergetics, because I think it's super important, and it really is the future.
Thank you so much.
I hope you learned something on today's podcast. If you did, please share it with your friends and family, and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It's really helpful for getting this information out to more people who desperately need it. Sharing all the experts I know and love and the powerful tips I have is one of my absolute favorite things to do. Thanks for being part of my community. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. It is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Thanks for listening, and have an amazing day.